Good morning. It is about 6 a.m. right now in Montreal, Canada, and it's really hot. The sun came out really fast and I woke up early. I was feeling called to make this video. I've been feeling called to do this for a long time, actually. We're gonna do it. I have my computer with me and I'm gonna share a little bit of some insights, just a few, about teaching yoga, some things that you probably don't think about from your fellow yogi teachers. Like for now, at the moment, I teach yoga more than anything else. This is my job. I do part-time and it's still quite a lot. If you think about it, teaching yoga takes a lot of effort, truly. Planning out the classes, planning out the music, getting your technique done, finding your own personal style, how you want to teach, getting to each studio, if that's an in-person studio, or if it's online, you have to have a setup. Maybe, like for example, me, I set up my online classes like how I want the room to look like. Every single time I change it. So there's a lot of thought that goes into it. I think most people don't realize that. The first and biggest thing that I've thought of during my whole teaching career is at the beginning, when I first started teaching yoga, I would prep my classes. I would take an hour and go through a sequence, create it, thinking about like what was the best transition to get into each pose. I would try to memorize, okay, how I want it to be exactly like one after another. And I would write it down on either on my computer or on a piece of paper. And I would see a lot of teachers bring like journals and papers with them to their classes, because sometimes you want to keep the sequence, and it's, if you have short-term memory, sometimes like my memory is not the best. So for me, having a piece of paper on the side was really helpful, but it took a lot of effort, right, to create the class. And one example of this is I once taught in Maine in a summer camp. I was sleeping in the same cabin as the kids of the summer camp and two other counselors, and we would get up early, do our whole morning breakfast routine. I would go and teach my classes. I would have maybe 4 to 5 classes a day on average, but I would feel stress. I would feel anxiety because I didn't really have time to prep that class before, and it forced me to be spontaneous about what I was teaching. I had to make up stuff on the spot. Thank goodness I did that, even though it felt really uncomfortable, but it helped me know how to be spontaneous with my classes. And in fact, it really truly helped me become a better teacher. And that came along when I ended up going to Peru and helping to lead some yoga teacher trainings. And I was doing the same thing. I was, bringing my paper to the classes, and at one point another teacher said to me, that's not really very professional. It's just not professional at the end of the day, and not something a good yoga teacher would do. And it left me feeling like, I don't know, I felt it was a rude comment. I thought it was not something an open-minded person would say. Instead of asking me why do you bring your paper? The point is, they thought it wasn't very professional to bring the paper or a journal with me, because I wanted to be very sure. I was teaching students, right? People who want to become teachers, and I wanted to be really assured that I was teaching what I had prepared for. But at the end of the day, when they asked me to stop prepping the classes like that, and I started teaching spontaneously, it really helped, even though I didn't agree at the time. And I do see a lot of teachers preparing their classes and bringing a notebook with them. I still felt like it did help, even though I didn't like it at the time. It did help me become better, more spontaneous. And in fact, now I don't even prep my classes anymore. I go unprepared and I just start from scratch, and I just teach based on how my body is feeling, how my energy is. At the same time, I connect that with how my students are feeling, where their energy is at. And I always ask, do you have any sore muscles today? Do you have any injuries? Or do you have anything you would like to work on? And it gives me a theme. It gives me an idea of what to address and work around. And in fact, my classes are now better than ever before. I think that it's important to have a structure to your class, but once you practice and you master what your personal style is, then you can kind of break the rules with your sequence, and you can play with different postures, different transitions, and really it just becomes more authentic, and your students can feel it at the end of the day. That was my first one. Oof, okay. My next one is a really big one. If you've taken a yoga teacher training, you'll understand this. But once you become a teacher and you study yoga at least once, maybe in a 200-hour training or 50-hour training even, afterwards, it's easy to feel biased by taking other people's classes. It's really easy, and it's something that we as yogis must learn to manage. Actually, it's a good thing to go and take other people's classes, even if you feel like you're going to be biased towards it, because it helps humble you. It helps you learn from them something new. There's always something new to learn from other people, but also it helps you notice where your ego is at, how big it has gotten. It pops up for me every single time I take someone's class. My ego is there and I see it. We always think that we know better. When you see a yoga teacher making a mistake or doing something that you question at the end of the day, that you're like, what? That wasn't a pose, or that's not how I would name it, or that's not how I would transition or use the breath cueing. That's one thing that I didn't really think about when I started taking my training back in 2018, because you no longer see your teachers the same way. But I think it's a good thing at the end of the day to feel that ego and just surrender to whoever is teaching to you at the time. Another big thing that I feel connects with that, I have met other yogis, other teachers that they have found their own style, they have found their passion in yoga, and they're taking their own path. However, I think it's important to be careful with the godlike yogi, the one who feels that they know everything, and they're like, this is how you should do it if you're a yogi, this is how you shouldn't do it. And I've experienced that, especially in the last year. I saw some yoga teachers that were like, oh, you're not a real yogi if you don't do this or you don't do that. I completely disagree. I feel like if you're saying that, then you're not a true yogi, because you're not preaching, you're not keeping an open mind, you're not actually embodying the beauty of yoga, because yoga is so abstract. There's so many paths, there's so many ways to embody what yoga has to teach, what Ayurveda has to teach, everything. That to say, oh, you're not a true yogi or a teacher if you're not living this certain way, that's a very dangerous thing to do and to say and to preach. And I think it's important to stay a little far away from people like that. It's important to learn and absorb and observe people with what they know and what they've learned, but to tell someone that they should live a life specifically in a certain order in order to call themselves a yogi, that I don't think is fair or correct at all. And so that comes in a little bit with the biased theme. That's important to practice what feels good to you, but we're all gonna have a different style at the end of the day. We're all gonna have a different perspective on how we approach this beautiful, beautiful embodiment of yoga. Next one, oof. Okay, all right. The next one I wrote as constantly need to keep your food intake up. As a yoga instructor, like yesterday I had 3 classes to take, and literally every single time I finish my class, I go back home and I eat. I eat, and I focus on clean eating, but it doesn't mean I'm not eating sugars every now and then. It doesn't mean I'm definitely eating a lot of carbs. I'm making sure that my fuel intake is up, because it takes a lot of energy to teach a class. Your voice, you have to be in the right mood, and when you're not in the right mood, you have to fake it. Like yesterday, there was a heat warning for the last 2 days, and I was on my period. Well, honestly, was just not feeling good to teach classes, and I had to fake it. Afterwards, I kind of had to take care of myself, and I had to slow down. Honestly, I just fell asleep at 6 p.m. I woke up today at 4 a.m. because my body needed extra rest, and that's it. At the end of the day, we put in so much energy into our classes that if you're not eating well, or you're not sleeping well, or you're exerting your energy too much, your students are going to feel it, your classes are not going to feel the same. But also, just as an individual, you need to respect yourself and find the right middle ground to keep yourself healthy at a right balance. Balance is the key. The 4th one is it keeps you networking and meeting new students. Ever since I started teaching, specifically at 2 different studios here in Montreal, my skills for networking have really gone up. And I'm proud of myself because I am an extroverted introvert at the core. I'm good at socializing with people, I feel, but internally I do really love and prefer my own space, my own privacy. Working at these studios has forced me to be social, and the students every time come up to me, they tell me what they liked in the class. I always ask them like, hey, what would you change? Do you want to try a specific pose? there's a lot of room to make friends, a lot of room to network, to socialize, and I found it super interesting, especially at one studio. There's a lot of really interesting people that come in there. This is probably one of the luxurious places in Montreal where people go. So there's people from really high paying jobs, and they're pretty smart. So I always sit and listen to what they have to say, whether that's business, whether that's events. I really am their student at the end of the day, and I really listen, and I think it's really important because then with teaching at studios like this, I can say, hey, I am gonna go and teach at a park. You should come join. And then those people are majorly usually coming to my external classes at the park or online. They want to know more. They want to join all of your classes, especially if they like what you do and how you teach and your personality. You're set, you've made a friend for life, and that's a big part of being a yoga teacher, that it kind of forces you to be a networker or a businesswoman at its core. Definitely see it as an opportunity when networking with your students is available. The fifth one is practice makes perfect. It takes a really long time to find your personal style of teaching, and what I mean by that is I think it wasn't until like 3 years ago that I actually started to feel like I knew what I was doing, or like I found my personal style of teaching, because we all teach differently. Some people love to teach slowly. They like to do yin classes, restorative. It took me a long time to kind of figure out, how do I transition from teaching what I was taught to teaching what feels innately like me, like what I would want to do on my own. I have to say, when I first did my yoga teacher training, I was so nervous. I hated public speaking. I would get so nervous. I would literally shake when I had to give presentations. I remember my first class I ever taught was a Latino group. Because I'm Mexican, my mom and her friends had kind of created this little gathering so that I would have the opportunity of teaching them. It was super interesting because this Latino group, it was mostly women. There were some men too. It's funny because they knew me really well. So when I was teaching, at first I was really, really nervous, and I was just trying to get it right. I was just trying to pretend like I knew what I was doing, and just trying to conquer my fears of being the one who was in charge in the room at the time. It was funny because there was moments when the Latino women would start laughing out loud, or they would talk to each other, and to me immediately I was like, oh, how rude, you know, like this is like I'm trying to teach, they're not taking me seriously. But no, it was just the people who were in the room, and it actually made it better at the end of the day. It made people more relaxed, and sometimes you just gotta sit back and allow people to do things that are different, that, you know, yoga doesn't have to be serious all the time. Once they laughed, I kind of found my power, and I started dominating the room in a very healthy way. I started feeling so powerful, like I had the control, and I don't know what it was about it. Like, it was just like a switch where all of a sudden I was like, I got this. I got this. I am the yoga teacher, and I know what I'm doing. And I was just like, yo, do this, do that, do this, do that. And it felt so empowering. That's a whole thing. I could go into it, but there's something about taking up space and empowering your own voice that is, you can't explain it until you actually feel it. Next one. You need to be an entrepreneur to a certain degree to make good money. And that's the reality. A lot of people don't realize it, but it's hard to be a yoga teacher in different senses. Like, you get paid really well per hour, but it's not like you're teaching 8 hours a day. So you have to make sure that you are teaching enough classes per week to make a good living. You also have to be good at negotiating your salary. For example, recently I had an increase in my salary at one of my studios, and I didn't agree. I felt like it was still a low increase, and I negotiated my salary higher, which felt really, really good. But it's important to be able to voice your opinion, because you gotta think about all the travel to get to the studios, the time you put into your classes, also the empowerment. Like, for example, when I started teaching at one of my studios, a lot of the students were like beginner level. They were not advanced. They were not, like, you could tell that this is something that they did every once in a while, not consistently. They still had a lot of work to do to get to even intermediate postures. And so when you're negotiating your salary with studios, for example, I have also included the fact that, I help students reach a certain level of proficiency in their asanas. People are actually seeing results with their practice when they're getting classes from me. And so that's a really big thing that I think helped increase my salary. But also, if you're a yoga teacher, you need to go out of studios. You need to make your own events, if you can, outside, or partner with maybe like food companies or drink brands, beverage companies, all these things, because it really helps you make more money, have more visibility, and be an entrepreneur, because that's it at the end of the day, and that's the reality. That's why, for example, I have a few yoga videos on my channel, and they're pretty old, but I still get a lot of people who are like, hey, we want more yoga classes online. And it's not that I don't want to, it's my own limiting beliefs, it's my own resistance to make time for that I haven't done it. But it's really important. I am really hoping I get to do more videos this summer for you guys. At the end of the day, things like that, even tiny little videos, you do a little video here and there, it helps spread the word to other people. It helps people stay engaged with you as a teacher. Also getting a little glimpse of how you teach. If people want to join your classes but they're not so sure, they don't know if they like how you teach or your personality, or just giving them a little YouTube video to follow before maybe signing up to your studio classes, that makes a big difference. Yeah, so be your own entrepreneur at the end of the day. And that's it, my lovelies. That's all I have for you today. If you have recommendations that you would like to see from me, feel free to ask me, because it gives me more incentive to do it. I hope you enjoyed it, and till next time.